You're listening to the Today's Conveyancer podcast, the leading source of information for residential property lawyers in England and Wales. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todaysconveyancer.co.uk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Hello, welcome along to the latest Today's Conveyancer podcast. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Chris Harris. Chris is well known in the sector, I think it's fair to say, and is talking to me today in his role as the founder of a new technology platform, Collaborative Conveyancing. You're going to explain it an awful lot better than me, Chris, but it's a delight to have you on the podcast. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you, David. That's really good of you. Thank you for the introduction. Very kind.
My first question is always the same. You don't need much of an introduction, Chris, but tell us a little bit about yourself and your current venture.
I suppose I'm best known for building Lawyer Checker and then selling it, but also, as you well know, David, Today's Conveyancer, British Conveyancing Awards and Today's Media, and I really love what you're doing with them. So really excited to have founded that and see how well it's going. But before Lawyer Checker, I've been a panel manager and I've been a practicing conveyancer. So I've been around the business quite a long time. Today, I do consultancy with a couple of firms. I'm running two businesses, one called Valify, which I'm sure you'll hear more about in coming weeks. But I'm also the founder of Collaborative Conveyancing, which is a solution to help people make inquiries easier.
As I say, you don't need much of an introduction, but Collaborative Conveyancing does. We'll come on to that in a second. I think it's fair to say that you've seen a huge amount of change and consolidation, and of course you've alluded to the fact that you've been part of that. What's your view on the current state of the market, particularly with technology? Is there more consolidation on its way? Why isn't technology making the lives of conveyancers easier?
We can see that there's some great turnkey solutions out there where you can end-to-end conveyancing, to steal someone's key phrase, but there's also lots of wonderful new players. And the more that I've worked in the startup space, which I have a lot with Collaborative Conveyancing in the last year, the more you can see some really exciting changes and developments in the way that conveyancing is happening. But as well as technology creating barriers to entry and creating these big forts that people create of ecosystems, technology democratizes as well. And there's space for small organizations to come up with some really good technology. So whilst I see a consolidation potentially happening, I can also see a lot of collaboration. There's some big players out there encouraging collaboration at the moment, which the sector needs. You've sort of said, well, why isn't technology improving things? Well, I think it clearly is. When I compared doing conveyancing to today to when I was doing it when I was first practicing, I had a telephone, I didn't have any internet, I didn't have any emails, I didn't have the ability to communicate or automate or collect data, or I was completely at the whim of the post office and the DX. And if those things stopped working, everything stopped. And I think what's actually happened is we've got a much more complex conveyancing structure today with consumers' expectations considerably quicker. Whilst conveyancing technology is helping and things are making things better, probably not helping as much as it is in other sectors. And therefore, consumers' expectations have gone sky high. Everybody wants everything now. But beyond that, I think that the challenges relate to liability, litigation, the experience of conveyancers. And whilst technology can supplement and help a lot of the problems within the market, it's not the complete solution. We still need good quality conveyancers knowing what they're doing, and they're in short supply, David, at the moment.
Yeah, that's very true. And I know for a fact that you've been keeping an eye on that. You've written about it in Today's Conveyancer. You were telling me some stats the other day, though, that the number of vacancies has gone down again recently.
Yeah, so back in September, number of vacancies for conveyancing that are being advertised on some large websites effectively double what they are today. And we can see the impact of redundancies, people changing roles, and actually conveyancing confidence. And right now, conveyancing confidence seems a lot lower than it was last September if you just base it on the number of job adverts out there. And that's quite interesting when you look at the amount of people that are leaving the sector, the amount of people that are retiring that know what they're doing, and the quality of conveyancers that are coming through who haven't been trained quite in the same way that some of the older people have. And the experience is lacking, unfortunately. And I don't think the last few years of COVID and working from home and not being able to look at what other people are doing and working alongside them and bounce ideas has helped anything at all, David. But technology supplements and technology will help, and technology can make things better, but we still need to be able to make sure that we've got trained and effective people actually using the technology.
It's that combination of people and technology ultimately, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're going to tell me that Enquiries is where we need to focus some of this technology, naturally, but where else should we be focusing our energies in terms of what needs to be developed to help conveyancers, in your view?
So I think collaboration tools, the ability for us to more effectively share data, transmit data, use data from other people in a way that's effective. So if someone sends a contract to us, it'd be really useful to have it in a CSV so we can actually, our systems can actually populate our systems what's in the contract to make sure that data's easily transmitted and easily working together. So collaboration is one big key theme. Secondly, using structured data more effectively, we can already see auto report builders and things like that, and post-completion technology working really well, which is all around structured data. The thing for me is inquiries. The email with 20 to 60 questions in it is a blob, unstructured words on a page without any ability to take those individual items out and process them individually. Most things that we do now are relatively processable, relatively easy to consume, and the way that we deal with inquiries are really difficult to actually take on board, open, read, delve into, and understand that you've got multiple tasks to do off a single email.
Well, Enquiries is certainly an issue that most conveyancers are going to relate to. Why has it become such an issue, do you think?
I think everybody wants to do the right thing by the client, and we all want to avoid being sued. And I think as prices have fallen, the people that are acting on sales are not always as experienced as they were historically. It's easier to delegate a sale than a purchase to a more junior member of staff on the basis that you're more likely to be sued on a purchase than a sale. And often we find that people putting together sale packs and answering sale inquiries are still learning. And I think that leads to knee-jerk reactions in terms of what we think that we need to ask. There's a misunderstanding in many cases of both the protocol and law. And I think that leads to people asking questions that sometimes are not necessary. But I would say that caveat emptor as a principle is very important. People should have the right to ask whatever they want about the property that they're acting for their client on, and it shouldn't be for us to judge those questions. Whilst we might want to, caveat emptor, buyer beware, should result in free flow of questions in my mind, and therefore the questions should come through, and if we don't agree with them and we don't think they're appropriate, clearly we should back them back. But many of these questions are about things that could make the transaction much more quickly if it was easy to process. But often I think sellers, conveyancers often hide behind the protocol or hide behind we're not going to do that, just because it's easier to say no than it is to provide the data. And equally, I think buyers, conveyancers ask questions when they could get the data themselves in the first place. But I think neither side seems to have the revenue in the case, the experience, the knowledge to work collaboratively to move cases forward in many cases. It's almost as if people are trying to avoid doing work and make the other side do the work for you. And I think that's unfortunate and that creates challenge. Sometimes I've seen cases where we seem to end up arguing more about who's going to answer the question or get the data than we could have done if we'd have just gone and got it in the first place.
You brought up the protocol, and I'll mention BASB. We have standard inquiries in place. Why on earth are we asking more questions?
Every case is individual. We've got people that have got perceptions about what liability means. There's no enforcement. There's lots and lots of reasons for it. But the point isn't about those guidelines. The point is about how we all work together to make the case move forward more quickly. And if automation occurs both on the purchase side and on the sales side, the data can be obtained in much cleverer and quicker ways so that the number of inquiries can come down. But people are scared. People are worried. People do not understand in all cases what they're doing, and therefore they raise questions. I don't believe it's coming from consumers particularly. I think it's coming from people's perception of what they should do on a file.
That's interesting, because my sort of thoughts are that it could be consumer driven, that these are questions that are being asked by people buying their home and they're taking a more active part in that process. But there's also a question about, surely the agent should be doing some of this. The whole point of the parts A, B, and C that are coming from the National Trading Standards team is to try and get some more information up front to enable that informed decision at an earlier stage. Or do you see that the types of inquiries that are being sent through aren't relevant at the point of listing?
I think some of these questions are very important to raise, but even providing upfront information, you'll ask more questions. If someone provides information about flooding on a property, that may raise more questions than it actually solves by providing it. But I do think that actually conveyancers are missing a trick here to just narrowly say our role is just about the title, knowing full well that that's what we've been trained to do and that's in essence what we want to do. That misses a value opportunity to be the conveyancing concierge, the home move concierge, to look at all the other questions and facilitate it for your client and make sure that your client, where the questions are relevant, you're giving the right answers to the client. So if the client genuinely wants to know something daft, maybe we should just say, well, look, we could charge more money if we answered more of these questions more effectively. But on the flip side, I do think that many of these questions are raised through fear. So, I saw a conservatory questionnaire the other day with 30 questions in it. Now, quite honestly, do you need to raise 30 questions on a conservatory? And I think that causes lots of challenge and difficulty. And when a buyer raises 30 questions on a conservatory, the seller's lawyer is just going to look at them with despair and say, to be honest, I'm not paid to do this. Go away. I'm not going to do it. This is not protocol. And they'll send that back to the buyer's lawyer, and the buyer's lawyer will write back and say, I want to know, I want to know, I want to know. And this, it's not my job. It's not your job. It's not his job. It's not her job. The estate agent should be doing it. The mortgage broker should be doing it, etc., etc. Just causes blockage and delays. If sometimes we were just able to say, this is not within the remit of what we can do, but it's low risk. And if we answer it, it moves the property transaction forward, we'll just do it. So for example, buyer's lawyer asks for an EPC, protocol says you shouldn't do that. Seller's lawyer looks at it. Seller's lawyer thinks, oh, I can either go to the register and get the EPC or find it somewhere else, which will take me 6 minutes. Or I can just write back and say, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not protocol. Goes back to buyer's lawyer. Buyer's lawyer sits on it for a couple of days. We've lost 10, 15 days worth of transaction time. If the buyer's lawyer is stupid enough to ask for the EPC, wouldn't it be great if a robot just went and got it, gave it to the seller's lawyer and say, we've seen that the other side have asked for an EPC. We've got it. Do you want to just send it to the other side? It's a matter of public record. It's up to the buyer's lawyer what they do with it. Caveat emptor applies. The transaction moves forward, even though the buyer has asked a question that the seller's lawyer thinks isn't appropriate. It's about, are we there just to say we are only going to do this very, very narrow thing, or are we there to make transactions move forward? And it's easy just to say someone else should be doing this. It's a lot more consumer friendly and valuable, and therefore you could charge more for it if you actually make the thing happen for your client.
We're going to talk about artificial intelligence and natural language processing, which you're going to have to explain to me, because like a lot of people, it goes over my head. The first thing is that there's a lot of nervousness around it, of course, because a lot of the press will tell you that it's going to replace the lawyer in the first instance. What's your view on replacing lawyers with artificial intelligence?
Let's start with what is AI and NLP. And I think I'm a solicitor, technically. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not technical. I enjoy technology, but I've spent most of the last 15 months learning more about this area than ever I possibly wanted to know. I think my conclusion is it doesn't matter what it is. It's like my telly, my TV has got some AI in it because if I speak to it, it understands me and will do certain things. Do I need to know what that is or how it works or why it works? No. Do I understand active suspension on my car or how my car knows when to beep if I reverse into something? No. AI and NLP, we don't need to know what it is because that's features. It doesn't matter what the features of it are. What we need to know, what are the benefits? And like all technology, sometimes it's deployed well and sometimes it's deployed badly. And a lot of people, 3 years ago, were talking about blockchain. Lots of people still talk about blockchain, but blockchain wasn't a solution. It was a feature. It was a security feature in the transmission of things and validating things, but it wasn't a solution in its own right. And AI and NLP is not a solution in its own right unless it's deployed effectively. That's what I would say about AI. And then I think, how can it help with inquiries? What I would say to you is, well, what Collaborative Conveyancing are building is a solution that takes inquiries out of emails. It looks to see if those inquiries have been asked before or where they've got to in the conveyancing process. It puts them as separate items with date time stamps so you can see how long they've been going on. It puts statuses around them so you can work out, have we answered that one or not? If you're a seller's conveyancer and you're sent 30 inquiries in an email and you've got no way of dealing with each one of those as a process task, and you've got another 100 files, there's a fair chance you're going to miss one of those 30 questions and you're going to be chased on it. And actually being chased on something is really, really inefficient for the transaction and it slows it all down. But actually being able to take those 30 inquiries and at the click of a button see that 5 are still outstanding and the people that you've gone to get the information haven't provided it to you yet, so you've not been able to provide it to the buyer, that's helpful. So first of all, we extract inquiries. Secondly, we use natural language processing, which is just a computer understanding language in a better way than it has done previously. And we're building what's called a narrow language model to understand conveyancing and understanding what the question means, both in terms of intent and also in terms of subject. So we can then say, this question means that they are asking for this. And we can then go and do the menial tasks that conveyancers are not really paid lots of money to do, to go and do those things quickly and easily. So if this buyer wants a planning permission that's 5 years old, we should be able to read that question, understand a planning permission is required, and ultimately, when we've built out the tool, to go and get that planning permission. So when the seller's conveyancer reads the question, we will be able to tell the seller's conveyancer, we think they've asked for a copy of a planning permission. We've gone and got the planning permission that we think they're asking for. Here it is. Would you like us to send it to the other side? And the answer's yes or no. And instead of having to do all the menial grunt of having to go and find a planning permission, which you don't go to college for, or you don't go to uni for all those years to understand and pass all those difficult exams about trust law and land law to actually understand what you're doing, you're not trained to go and find a planning permission. That isn't why we're there. But if something can go and get that planning permission and deliver it to you and allow you to make the decision whether or not you're going to send it to the other side, that's got to be an improvement. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to take the questions out of the process, extract them, date, time stamp them, understand them, and then deliver to the seller suggested answers in terms of what action they want to take. We're not replacing lawyers. We don't believe that AI and computers will ever do that. We think conveyancers and humans are central to the process. We're just making assisted decision making, a bit like predictive text, a bit like spell check. If I have to write a complicated word that I can't remember how to spell, it's really, really useful. The computer tells me that I spelt it wrong and suggests an amendment. In the same way, if someone went off and said, you need to ask the client if they've got a copy of this damp-proof course certificate, that's got to be better than me going off and writing to the client, asking for the client for a damp-proof course certificate. Not the best example in the world, but it's one example of many. And that's what we're doing, David. We are just creating assisted and predictive inquiry answering for sellers' conveyancers.
You mentioned about the fact that the contract was sent in a CSV format, and that would enable the firm to use it better. In order to capitalize on this, are you going to need inquiries and data to be sent in a particular format, or is that something that we need to be thinking about in order to make this process better?
No, that's the purpose of using natural language processing, that we can actually read some of that information and take it out and then be able to understand it. We're intending to answer the questions that are being raised and make that process easier. And through that, we're going to either be a piece of middleware within people's case management systems, or we're going to be a piece of software within people's Outlook systems. We're not going to be another portal to log on to, we don't think. We're not going to be another system that sits alongside all the other systems that you've got to cope with, another password to remember. We're going to be embedded, a piece of invisibleware that sort of sits in the middle, that drives things forward more effectively.
We're talking when recently ChatGPT 4 has been released, which is 8 times more powerful than ChatGPT 3. And those of us that have used ChatGPT 3 were pretty impressed by that in the first instance. Presumably, this is a moving feast. It's changing all the time, and your ability to do this is going to change dramatically over the course of the next 12, 18 months.
Yeah, we're really lucky to be working with some absolutely excellent AI experts who understand all of this and are right at the cutting edge of all of this stuff. And that's making a huge difference to us. ChatGPT is a wide language model. It's there to understand language in its widest possible form. It isn't there to understand conveyancing language and conveyancing law and conveyancing process, and that's what we're building. We're building a narrow language process that sits on top of things like ChatGPT in order to enhance the wide language model that understands English to actually understand conveyancing English. That's the value add that we're giving. The pace of change is obviously very, very quick, and things are improving, rapidly. But we do think that the way in which we're building the ability to extract, understand, and act is a implementation of this technology that's designed for a very niche market, conveyancing in a particular way. I can't see that ChatGPT is going to go off and do things for you in the immediate future. It may well do that in the future. It needs to be able to have action at the end of it, not just the ability to answer knowledge-based questions.
Now, you've recently secured some additional funding for the business. What are you hoping that that's going to enable you to do?
To start with, Karen Babington, who's well known in the sector, and I have put in quite a substantial amount of money for the last 12 months, and we've worked really, really hard to get to where we've got to. And we have been very, very lucky to be recognised by Innovate UK, and we've had an investor put some money in as well. So that's very, very exciting. It's nice to have the endorsements. We've got a substantial amount of money now to enable us to drive forward the things that we really want to do, and that's really ensuring that the training that we're giving our system has got the best possible understanding of conveyancing in it. And we'll be using well experienced conveyancers to train and educate our model to make sure that it actually properly understands what's in the protocol, what's not in the protocol, what it all means, what is an exchange, what's holding things up, where to go to get stuff. And that's what we're going to use the money for.
I think the point that comes through for me, and certainly from my understanding of AI and the work that goes into it, is that you have to overlay that narrow training that you've talked about, the fact that it's not enough for it just to sort of be AI. You have to train it on how to understand conveyancing, how to understand the language of conveyancing, as you said, Chris. I guess the final question from me, and we're fast running out of time, is when is this going to be available? Because you're clearly making some progress.
We're extracting inquiries out of emails at a reasonably high level of accuracy at the moment. And I think that of itself is really, really helpful for lawyers. We are understanding what the questions mean at a level that isn't yet ready for the market, and actually working out which are the most common inquiries and the best way to tackle the "we'll go and get this" or "we suggest you do that" type acting on the questions is written on paper but not yet been developed. Over the coming months, we've got another conveyancer joining us to help us ensure that we've got a decent amount of resource in training this. 2 people will be training this, two experienced conveyancers. For those of you that know my conveyancing knowledge, you'll be glad to hear that I'm not training it. We've got a series of developers joining us, which is great. And I think if people want a demo now of a very, very early stage prototype, please contact me. Very, very happy to show you. But at the moment, it's limited in what it can do. Over time, that's going to move forward very quickly. And, I would hope that within 3 to 6 months, we're going to have something that we can show people. I think it's exciting. I'm really enjoying it. The technology is fascinating. It's not going to replace conveyancers. But as ever, the role of conveyancers is going to evolve and change. And if you're a conveyancer that wants to stay, I can remember the days of scale fees, and weren't emails great? And it wasn't disruptive when the DX came in. You're going to struggle. But if you're a conveyancer that says, my job is to act in my client's best interest, help them move house as quickly as possible, and I really enjoy it when we exchange if they get the keys and they're happy and things go well. Get in there, embrace the technology that's coming down the line, and talk to people like us and others, because technology is going to make things better. Collaboration is going to make things better. Things like what we're building today are really going to help improve the lives of conveyancers and make it less stressful, easier to do, so you don't have that pit of your stomach empty feeling when you think something's gone wrong at 2 o'clock in the morning, when you know something has happened that shouldn't have happened.
If that's not a call to arms, I don't know quite what is, Chris. A really interesting thought, and I agree. I think the role of the conveyancer will change. We're not going to see the end of conveyancing. We can't see the end of conveyancing. It's still a reserved profession, and there are reserved elements to the process, of course. It's been a delight to have you on the podcast. We're out of time. You could probably tell me more about this for the rest of the afternoon, but thank you very much indeed for joining.
David, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to speak to you and your audience. It's really good. Thank you so much.
The Today's Conveyancer podcast is available on your preferred podcast provider. It's also available on todaysconveyancer.co.uk. My thanks to Chris. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
You're listening to the Today's Conveyancer podcast, the leading source of information for residential property lawyers in England and Wales. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todaysconveyancer.co.uk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.